Well, I suspect that we might be a little bit late to the party. I think other countries probably got stuck into this a year or two back. But regardless of when we start, it's great that we're starting. And I think it's really encouraging to see the momentum. Well, I think being late to the game is not always bad. I mean, one example that I often give is if you look at China, China now leads the world in mobility, mobile payments, mobile banking, and one of the reasons that they do is because they could leapfrog, generations of technology. So if you look at banking and communications, 20 years ago, China was probably almost definitely underserved in terms of financial services, banking, insurance, and probably, I don't, can't be too dogmatic, but I suspect that the data communications infrastructure was probably not the greatest. The advantage the Chinese have had is by moving aggressively and investing very large amounts of money, they've leapt over the traditional banking branch-based infrastructures, and they've leapt over the traditional cables in the ground approach to networking. So it's worked very well for them, and I think on a different scale, a different context, it can work from Hong Kong. I think there's a number of necessary conditions, if you like, for success, and one is to see the government actively involved. Now, we can't expect the government to lead everything and fund everything, but the government does need to create an environment in which commercial organisations and universities, corporates, startups, whatever, an environment in which what they're doing, the direction in which they're driving is consistent with government policy, and to whatever extent possible is receiving active government support. The Hong Kong government's been active for a number of years with their open data program, making a lot of data about traffic, population, all that kind of stuff has been readily available, and they've encouraged businesses to utilise that data to develop value-add services. Now, it's been successful, could have been more successful, but again, it's a promising start, it's a foundation. In terms of the companies, of the corporations, the private businesses, I think everybody in Hong Kong is extremely aware of privacy concerns and issues, and I think most Hong Kong businesses are justifiably quite cautious in the amount of data that they capture, how long they keep it, and what they do with it. I mean, one example is we've put a large sensor-based system into a large shopping mall in Central. So that's got cameras, it's got sensors, so we can track individuals, we can track them to some extent by the mobile device and the data that mobile device emits. There are cameras, so we can do facial recognition, but the owner-operator of the mall now has made a deliberate decision not to utilize, not to capture a lot of that information, because they just want to see legally, and perhaps equally important culturally, how their customers and how citizens in Hong Kong feel about having data of where they are, who they're with, what they're doing. I mean, we all value our privacy, and those questions about to what extent we're prepared to surrender some privacy for advantages in terms of services or targeted advertising or useful data, those questions are still unresolved. And I think we can look at what other countries are doing, we can look at what's going on in China, we can look at what's going on in Europe, and really try and come up with a regime that's going to work for us here. But I think legislation is clearly the role of government, saying what companies are allowed to do by law. And I think with a framework emerging from the government and the the corporates having more experience of this and testing the reaction of their customers, the right way that's appropriate for Hong Kong will emerge over the next few years, I'm sure. But what we do is really enable government, corporates to really capitalise on the latest technologies. So some of the things we're actively involved in are IoT and sensor-based applications for retail areas, to some extent for monitoring people moving within specific areas. That's something that we can do. And of course, we're a big supplier of IT services to the government, developing a lot of applications that help the government departments run more smoothly. So our place really is to be a technology enabler rather than an owner or operator of infrastructure.